damage to the end. This bullet didn't have that.
Did any of your coworkers remark on this, or did you discuss this with anyone?
No, we didn't. You know, we were trying to save him, and that was just, I didn't go up there, you know, just really look at it because I didn't have time, but you just kind of remember those things.
Okay. Are there other things, what other events or occurrences caused you to be a conspiracy theorist?
Well, this wound, this head wound, started just in the temporal area and took out almost the occipital bone. This had to be an exit wound, and this is just my feelings and my question right now, because when you see him lurch forward, of course he grabs his neck first and then he comes back, but they were already past the scuba depository and started down this hill that curves and goes around out to Highway 35. And then somebody told me that Dr. Robert McClellan, who was one that worked pretty much on the present there in emergency, said that there had been a little bullet hole up here in the top. Now, I didn't see that because, like I say, the hair was pretty much as it was, just as though he had combed it. So this would, I guess, explain this huge part being gone. I'm confused about that.
Okay. And those are the two major sort of building blocks of your conspiracy.
Well, you know, after I left the emergency room, one of my friend, the nurses who was still working there, then she was down there when all this push and shove came about. The government was going to take the body away. The hospital says you can't do that, it's against the law. So they, I think, found a judge that came out and issued an order. That's what I've been told. That's all I know. So the government people would get to the door leading to the outside in the ambulance. The hospital people would take the body back down to trauma room 1. And I think this happened 3 or 4 times until the government just went out and the body left. There was a great big fine for taking a body that out of Texas without an autopsy, especially if they died in a suspicious manner, and the fine was $10.
When you learned that the governmental agencies were fighting over the custody of the body, did you actually hear skirmishes in the hallway?
Oh yes, they were very. There was a lot of cursing and a lot of shuffling of feet out there. Everything had kind of gotten still and focused in the emergency room. So anything going on the outside, you could hear that. And so yes, we were quite aware.
So that was the emotion. No tears, but there
was
Right. Fisticuffs between government agencies. Can you tell me, since you have the benefit of having been there, of having seen, is there something you can describe to us that we wouldn't know, that something that you saw there that might surprise us or might inform us about what that day was like?
Well, if the bullet didn't surprise you, it sure surprised me. I'm still wondering about that. After Dr. Clark had pronounced him dead, and you had to know Dr. Clark to even appreciate this, but he was a very formidable man, and he had little, squinty eyes, and his residents would just almost fall down when they came in because he was really hard on them. But after and he also wore these little bitty granny glasses. So when he was looking, it was just like this, I never saw him smile. I'd been scared to death he'd smile. But, well, I had worked one of his clinics one day, so, anyway, he didn't step, he strode. I could take about 4 steps to his every one. But there again, he said, okay, let's stop it. We stopped trying to get this present back, and he just walked without stopping, went right by Mrs. Kennedy and out the door, and on the way out the door he said, Madam, your husband's dead. So, I'm sort of like, whoa. But then I knew Dr. Clark. Neurosurgeons back there had patients with very poor prognosis.
Very clinical.
Yes. But now on my way out, I did stop in front of her and say, I'm very sorry for your loss. But there again, she was not responding to anything that was said. And she just never lost that stare there that she had.
Amazing. You have seen, or you're aware of 50 years of medical advances and technological advances in hospitals. A trauma room was very different in those days. I've seen the slides of the room. It was rather spare. Can you tell us what was in that room?
Well, if any of you have gone into the modern emergency rooms today, you have respirators and you have all kinds of x-ray equipment that's in the most trauma areas. And back there we had what we call a goncosuction. And it was about a half-gallon or a quart bottle with so much water in the bottom of it, and a rubber cork on top and a rubber tube coming out the top. Then you stuck the suction tip on the end of that to suction out patients. I always like to describe it as if when you're a kid, well, even some adults, but when you finish your Kool-Aid or your Coke or whatever, you get to the bottom and it's that slurp. Well, that was about how powerful that was. It was a slurp. But that's all we had. And the breathing machine that was used back there was called an intermittent positive pressure machine. And it could be used to either give some oxygen or also to give medicine, especially patients with asthma and whatnot. So multi-use. That was just about it.
Is there any possibility that had he been treated for the same wounds today with all of the technological advances?
No, there was just too much damage to the brain. No, I would just almost equivocally say no. There's not anything we could have done today either.
In the days following the assassination, or maybe the same day, who did you talk to? Who did you tell what you had seen?
Nobody. I didn't talk about this until it's been about 4 years ago. Not even my husband, not my family. I mean, if questions were asked, I would briefly answer them. Of course, my husband didn't really realize I was involved in all that because he thought I was in working the clinics that day, and he actually was licensed as a private investigator by the state of Texas because he did a lot of classified work for the government. So he was downtown a lot in the federal courts and just the regular courts building getting information for cases they might be working. One day he came home, this was after Jack Ruby had shot Lee Harvey, and said, I see him downtown and we say hi every once in a while. And before we were married, he visited the Carousel Club. He did admit that. In fact, I think we'd been married 2 or 3 weeks, and he took me down to the Carousel Club. And I don't know if that was a hint, but anyway, 3 weeks before the assassination, I was working in the obstetrical clinic that day, and so we had found out that there was a lady going to be coming in who did not speak English, and she was at her due date. and she had never had any prenatal care, and that she would have an interpreter with her. So we were all excited about somebody speaking Russian because we weren't world travelers, and so we never heard this before. But I happened to be the one that got to go in with the doctor for the examination, and it was Marina Oswald. So, like I say, this was about 3 weeks before the assassination, and Marina was a beautiful woman. Of course, she was quiet. Didn't understand the language, but Mrs. Payne did a good job in interpreting for her. And she also told us that Marina was very educated in Russia. She was a registered pharmacist. So anyhow, that was another kind of connection to this, and that's not the only one. After Ruby had shot Oswald, on one day I was working up in the orthopedic clinic, so one of my jobs was to go to the x-ray department and pick up x-rays for the patients who were going to be coming in. So I got down there with my cart, and one of the x-ray technicians I'd known, I guess, since I started work there, came right over and said, "Do you know who that is? Do you know who that is?" And I said, "Well, no." I mean, all I could see was this guy in an orange jumpsuit with 2 burly policemen with him, and he had on handcuffs and ball and chain around his ankles. They still used ball and chains back then. So he kind of shuffled around to go to his room, and when I could see his face, the technician said, "That's Jack Ruby." So Jack was having a high time. He really hated being in that jail because during the day he was all around Dallas, knew all the businessmen, and was always ready to glad hand him. And I think my husband knew him well enough to, to say hi or something like that. So that to me is kind of curious that I had seen those other 2 people.
I suppose Marina Oswald was without Lee Harvey when you saw her.
Right.
Yes. Okay. I'm wondering if you were ever debriefed or had any contact following the assassination with any...
No, I'm a non-person in the emergency room that day. And I didn't really think about it until recently, and I thought, well, it was strange that I was told that the administration had turned all those letters and information about the phone calls over to the FBI, but no, I was never talked to about it.
Did you maintain contact with any of your coworkers who
No.
were in the emergency room that day?
In fact, the single nurses who were working that day, and I think there were 4 or 5 who were still single working that day, and they left the state within 3 months because they were very frightened about the aftermath that had happened. And so no, I haven't spoke to anybody. About 3 years ago, my niece went down to the 6th floor museum. Her history class went down there, and she spilled the beans on me. She after, I'm just a country bumpkin, folks. I still had mud between my toes, but anyhow, after they had been through the museum, they always have a question and answer period. So they were going through the questions, and she didn't have a question, but she said, "My aunt was down there and took care of him." So then the museum called me, and so now I just talk about everything.
That's great. How fortunate for us, because 4 years.
Well, I think it's nice to study about these things in textbooks, but it's a lot more interesting when I'm telling you that.
Yes.
I'm sorry it has to be such a tragic measure, and I don't intend in any way to make light of this, because it was tragic for our country and surely a loss of innocence.
Definitely. I don't know if we have time to open up for questions.
discuss that.
Yes, I've seen it.
Oh, so why is it?
Uh,
Because the government wants to do a magic
no, the exhibit that I saw, you saw a picture that was sent around, a commission exhibit 399. I'm sorry. And my recollection of looking at it was actually the same way Phyllis described it. To me, it looked pristine. It was very shiny. And in fact, there was a bunch of us in the room. I had not gone there to look at it that day. I had frequented the archives a lot, but we had some newer people on board that day. And the person who was in charge of the collection said, I'm going to go get a couple items that I don't normally bring out. I brought that and the rifle and some other things out. And the immediate reaction of basically everyone in the room was, is that supposed to be like a copy of it, or is that the actual one? As a joke, and he's like, no, this is supposed to be it. And we all just kind of like, it doesn't make sense. So that's my recollection.
Anyone else?
My question is, I'm also an actor. I'm studying everything, I'm interested in it. For cleaning out the body, who was responsible for cleaning it out? And you just could find out, see all the wounds and everything.
Well, you don't do anything like that when an autopsy is pending.
Okay. So for him, there was an autopsy before they sent it?
No,
Oh.
the government got the body out and got it out to Air Force One, and this is theory, but I'm not the only one with it, that we know what the body looked like when it left. It didn't end up at Bethesda looking the same. There had been some tampering. There's a book on the internet, and it's written by Bobby J. Dobbs, D-O-B-B-S, and he has, have you seen those, Dr. McDermott, have you seen those photographs by Dobbs?
No, but I am familiar with the casket controversy. The allegation is that the casket that was loaded on is not the same casket that was removed.
But he has pictures post autopsy from Bethesda, and the wounds that we definitely saw that were there, it seems as though some of the major wounds, especially this one here in the throat and the head, has had just a ball of ink poured on and blotted, so you can't really make out what we saw at the hospital. Also, the pathologist that did the autopsy up there was not forensically trained. Is that true? Was not forensically trained. So that makes quite a big difference. I think their training is a lot longer and intensive than just a usual pathologist.
I understand that Dr. Crenshaw was one of the descending doctors there, one of the descending physicians in trauma room 1 there. Is he the only one, the only physician that has provided information that's consistent with the conspiracy side of the argument, or are there other former physicians there? I seem to recall, at least in the reading that I've done, it was primarily Dr. Crenshaw.
Well, recently in the Sixth Floor Museum, they had this program down there called Reunion, Trauma 1 Reunion. And Dr. McClellan and Dr. Jones, who also were in attendance there in emergency that day, told exactly what they had done. Now, I didn't get to see that. I was away speaking elsewhere. But I think that if you have read the Warren report or some of these other reports out there, I mean, this is exactly what was done by the men who did this, worked in the emergency room there. And I'm told, I haven't gone back and looked at the Warren report at all, but there's quite a few inconsistencies.
Who treated the governor? Or what was sitting in the front seat?
He was in a jump seat. The Kennedys were facing, well, I think they both were facing forward, but
No, in front. The guy who also got shot with. Conley? Yeah.
no, he wasn't in the front seat.
No?
No, it was, I think it was the jump seats, is that right, the jump seats?
There's a seat between the back and
No, but someone else got shot, right?
the middle seat. That's the jump seat.
Yeah.
It's like to the side.
That answer?
There's a question in the back.
Yes, Missy. Well, it's a question that doesn't really pertain to the hospitalization processing. What I want to ask is, at the time of the shooting, I was in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I had just entered junior high school, teenage. Through the press, it was said that there were issues concerning Vias pigs and other stuff that they had, I don't know. But besides that, there were also issues with the Kennedy family attending a case at the Senate of Jimmy Hoffa, the CEO, executive high head of the union.
The CIO,
I don't know, he was some head of the union.
right.
When the shooting took place, it was in the process already. Now, when Robert gets hit, this case is still pending. Does anybody know what happened? Well, according to a movie, which is titled, by the way, Hoffa, according to this film, Hoffa disappears. So, the hearing that he was attending at the Senate, God knows what happened with that, because now the man is outside in the street and he has disappeared. The funny thing of it is that today, currently now, they were in Chicago, because his office was in Chicago. He was the head of the union in Chicago. And today, the head of the union in Chicago is Hoffa's son. Does anyone know if there was any other judicial issues with the Kennedy family that was being attended during this time of shooting and whatever?
I don't know.
And this is why I said it does not pertain to the hospital procedures.
Right.
But perhaps maybe anybody knows.
I've heard a lot of things about the Hawks, but sometimes the media gets carried away, especially filmmakers.
Thank you.
Question over here.
Earlier you stated that you witnessed the wounds of Governor Conley and when he came to the hospital. Is that correct?
I didn't see the wounds, no.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Well, perhaps, if you spoke to any of the nurses that saw the wounds and if they were consistent with the massive wounds that Kennedy had.
No, I never discussed that part of it. Like I say, the only thing I had to do with Conley's wounds was the supervisor had asked me to go check on him after I left Kennedy's room, and they were on the way to the operating room at the time. I helped them up to the operating room, but I did not go into the suite. So I can't help you there.
Okay, question not regarding you as a nurse practitioner, nurse at the time, but as a citizen of Dallas at the time. Can you recall or tell us how the general mood of the community was regarding the president's death? Was it,
Well, it was mourning. People mourned for a while. In fact, it didn't take long for the people who had been there watching the motorcade go by to come out to Parkland and just surround the area where the ambulances usually pull in. And there was some crying, but not any loud outpouring, screaming or anything. But there was quite a crowd that gathered I normally would have left the hospital at 4 o'clock, but all the employees that day had to stay and get security clearance, which was done by the Civil Defense Department at that time. And when I left at 7, there were still people milling around out there, so, does that answer your question?
And for the, let's say for the week that followed, did you get a feeling of how people felt about President Mayfield in town?
Well, no, not really. I know that the only thing I know was probably came from the media some way, the newspapers or something. And of course, a lot was going on being televised during that time. I asked my youngest son, who was 3 at the time, not too long ago, I said, you know, do you remember anything about that at all? And of course, sometime during that following week, it showed the train going across the United States, and it would slow down at these small communities, and sometimes people in the really rural areas would walk out to the track, and that train would always slow, and I guess for a 3-year-old watching a train, that's what caught his attention. But then he said, you know, at one time, he said, I looked over at you, Mom, and you were crying, and I was thinking, this isn't a fun train, so.
Thank you.
Okay, due to time restrictions, we have one more question that can be taken.
Okay. My question is because when he came in, you said you guys took vital signs and there was no signs of him being alive.
Right.
I guess my question is, why did it take 43 minutes to pronounce him dead? What happened during those minutes? Why wouldn't they have pronounced it earlier?
Well, you know, when you get some really bad trauma in there, even if you think they're dead on arrival, sometimes you could just find one little spark and it can just change the whole thing. And every patient that came in there got that kind of care. It wasn't just because he was the president, but he was somebody who needed help, and we were going to try our best to give him that help.
Thank you very much. Oh, one more.
I know it was impossible for us to have a same President Kennedy, but even if, just hypothetically speaking, if we were to have been able to revive him, what you are saying is that he would have been the legislative state, where
I just, you know, it just seems an impossibility to me that we could have done anything because of the amount of the brain tissue that was gone. And I should think, had that been a possibility that we could have done something, it would be my guess that he would really have some sort of overlapping loss of mental capacity.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.